Stage 4 rolling blackouts are expected to stay in place throughout the weekend. Eskom implemented Stage 4 early yesterday morning after multiple breakdowns amounting to over 17,000 megawatts. Eskom has warned that changes in the rolling blackout stages will become more erratic and says this is due to the absence of the buffer that is normally provided by the diesel generation capacity between generating unit breakdowns. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Ruse Moleshe, who is an energy infrastructure financial planner. Ruse, good evening to you and welcome. So the main reasons given are generation unit breakdowns and diesel shortages, which will make the load shedding stages more erratic. As an expert, how do you interpret this?
Good afternoon or good evening, man, and good evening to the listeners. The way I interpret what is going on is what is linked to what has been ongoing for quite a while now, which is that we have capacity limitations in terms of the supply of generation into the country, and therefore any increase in demand or any reduction in the supply itself means that the system becomes unstable and people have to be load shedded. That's what is going on in the nutshell.
But when we hear that, you know, for example, because maintenance is cited as a common reason, but maintenance spend, you know, even though it's been flat over the last few years, has been going on. I think it's estimated at a rate of about 14 billion rand a year. So this argument that we often hear that maintenance, you know, isn't adequate and this is the reason these units are shutting down. Do you think we are being told enough and we're being let into enough of the detail of the picture around what's really at fault here, or what really is to blame?
We have been. I mean, there has been indication that the maintenance has been done hasn't been done in the most call it efficient way, for lack of a better word. So there has been spending on maintenance, but the maintenance hasn't been ideal. According to, I think Eskom had mentioned also that some of the contractors they used were not up to standard. So there is that, the inefficiencies in the system. Maintenance is a very important element of ensuring that there's proper functioning of the power plant. So if that, both in the past where these plants have been run for a very long time without proper maintenance, and also in the current period where that maintenance should be up to standard, those would have an impact, obviously.
Well, they're now embarking, as you heard in the introduction there, on a major maintenance project which is going to make capacity unavailable for many months. From your vantage point, what alternatives does it have at its disposal?
We are slowly but surely running out of, unfortunately, of options, because what we are doing now, when there's a lot of unavailability of the other generation units, we tend to rely on diesel, which is an unsustainable solution. So what we need to do is to bring in new capacity as soon as we can. And I don't know if there's enough in the system right now that's going on that's going to help us in the short term. I don't think so. But we need to look at new capacity in a nutshell for this problem to be eliminated. In the short term, we're advised about potentially buying power from the region, looking at independent power producers and increasing the existing plants and all of those. But all of those are just bandages over a sipping wound.
So how do you see it playing out?
We really need to have a plan in South Africa that spells out all of the options that we have on the table. Most of the options that we have are relatively long-term options. So we need South Africa to come together with respect to those options. Yes, the president came up with a plan which he outlined, which would include maintenance. But if Kubek is going to be off, which is about 960 megawatts, the sums don't add up. So someone who's responsible for this cabinet must relook at this and see what we can do over and above what we have.
You know, Ruse, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the brain drain, or, you know, the skills evaporation at Eskom over the last few years. And what we don't talk about enough in dealing with the problems around Eskom is around things like staff morale the psychological impact of skills that are simply missing in the system, that other people perhaps have to take on, more responsibilities for, which results in perhaps poor decision-making and planning. So against that backdrop, and of course you have more ideas at your disposal, what in your view is missing in the generation management mix?
Yeah, this generation within Eskom, firstly, in terms of skills, we've had very serious experienced people leaving Eskom, both within the Quebec framework as well as the general manager for generation. And the recent one, who was just appointed on a temporary basis, has also left. So Eskom, amongst other things that they are dealing with, that's one of the critical elements. If you don't have the requisite skills to be able to help you deal with the matter, then we are seriously in trouble. And remember that South Africa is solely dependent on Eskom in terms of supply. So the board needs to, the Eskom executive, supported by the board, needs to really come up with a plan with respect to skills retention and skills acquisition at Eskom.
Do you have any ideas on that front? I mean, some people have talked about, some researchers have talked about sweetening the deal, giving people better bonuses, treating Eskom really as an emergency entity that needs all hands on deck. We know that, of course, we're going in the right direction, even though, there's some questions about how the board is going to execute its duties after not having a board in place for over a decade. So that remains to be seen. But what other emergency measures, in your perspective, should be brought to bear on the situation?
Yes, obviously, Iman, any of the institutions that are looking for talent that is required in the sense of Eskom would have to sweeten the incentives. That goes without saying, and make sure that they get very qualified people. But sometimes there's also an issue with the environment being conducive. So in the long run, that needs to also be worked on, because you can pay me a lot of money, but if the environment I'm working in is not conducive, I may not last in that position. So those are the areas they need to look at. I would agree that they would need to get very experienced people, and that will come with giving proper incentives.
It sounds like more intervention certainly necessary, and some believers might say even divine intervention. Ruse Moleshe, thank you for talking to us this evening. She is an energy infrastructure financial planner, just dealing with the issue of the expectation around more load shedding this week.